John chapter 4, verses 1 through 29. When Jesus learned that the Pharisees had heard he was attracting and baptizing more disciples than John, though it was really not Jesus baptizing, but his disciples, he left Judea and returned to Galilee. This meant he had to pass through Samaria. He stopped at Sychar, a town in Samaria, near a tract of land that Jacob had given to his son Joseph, and Jacob's well was there. Jesus, weary from the journey, came and sat by the well. It was around noon. When a Samaritan woman came to draw water, Jesus said to her, "Give me a drink." The disciples had gone off to town to buy provisions. The Samaritan woman replied, "You're a Jew. How can you ask me, a Samaritan, for a drink?" Since Jews had nothing to do with Samaritans. Jesus answered, "If only you recognize God's gift and who it is that is asking you for a drink, you would have asked him for a drink instead, and he would have given you living water." "If you please," she challenged Jesus, "you don't have a bucket, and this well is deep. Where do you expect to get this living water? Surely you don't pretend to be greater than our ancestors, Leah and Rachel and Jacob, who gave us this well and drank from it with their descendants and flocks." Jesus replied, "Everyone who drinks this water will be thirsty again. But those who drink the water I give them will never be thirsty. No, the water I give will become fountains within them, springing up to provide eternal life." The woman said to Jesus, "Give me this water so that I won't grow thirsty and have to keep coming all the way down here to draw water." Jesus said to her, "Go, call your husband and then come right back here." "I don't have a husband," replied the woman. "You're right, you don't have a husband," Jesus exclaimed. "The fact is, you've had 5, and the man you're living with now is not your husband. So what you've said is quite true." "I can see you're a prophet," answered the woman. "Our ancestors worshipped on this mountain, but you people claim that Jerusalem is the place where God ought to be worshipped." Jesus told her, "Believe me, the hour is coming when you'll worship Abba God, neither on this mountain nor in Jerusalem. You people worship what you don't understand. We worship what we do understand. After all, salvation is from the Jewish people. Yet the hour is coming, and is already here, when real worshipers will worship Abba God in spirit and truth. Indeed, it is just such worshipers whom Abba God seeks. God is spirit, and those who worship God must worship in spirit and in truth." The woman said to Jesus, "I know that the Messiah, the Anointed One, is coming and will tell us everything." Jesus replied, "I who speak to you am the Messiah." Now the disciples returning at this point were shocked to find Jesus having a private conversation with a woman. But no one dared to ask, "What do you want of him?" or "Why are you talking with her?" The woman then left her water jar and went off into the town, and she said to the people, "Come and see someone who told me everything I have ever done. Could this be the Messiah?"
So throughout my life, I've had recurring dreams, and I don't know if anyone out there has had this particular dream. You're in school, you are in public, maybe shopping, walking a trail, just going about everyday business, when all of a sudden you realize that you left home without clothes. It's the birthday suit dream. Has anyone ever had the birthday suit dream? I see a couple hands. I think maybe some of you may be lying and maybe a little embarrassed. That's okay. It's okay. And it's dreams like this, the birthday suit dream, where after waking up of a night of sleep, you feel like you barely got any rest. Because it feels like you've been running from convenient hiding spot to convenient hiding spot in your dream all night long, trying to get from one place to the other, hoping that nobody sees that you didn't get dressed that day. And miraculously, in those dreams, you actually, at least I've never been caught, I've never had anyone say, "Oh, this guy out here who's shopping And Dylan's forgot to put on his clothes today. I've never had that happen in the dream. I always wake up and I'm thinking, oh, thank God this didn't happen in real life. I think about this quote from Lutheran pastor Nadia Bowles-Weber, where she says, I think that if shame could be bottled as an energy source, it could easily replace fossil fuels. If shame could be bottled as an energy source, it could replace fossil fuels. Our shame, the shame that we as humans, the shame that we see in this Samaritan woman today is a type of feeling, something that we as humans, it keeps us in motion. Shame keeps us in motion, trying to cover up and to hide and to pretend that all is well. This human tendency to run and hide in our shame begins with Adam and Eve, as they realized that their fig leaf covering wasn't enough. And so even after covering up, they go and they try and find a hiding spot from God. It's like playing hide and go seek with Eliana. We do this at least once a week, where she'll say, I want to play hide and seek, and one of us will count to 30. Usually when I count to 30, I will go slow to give her time to find a hiding spot. And for all 30 seconds, I hear her going from one place to the other. And then just, when I say 30, I come down and she's quiet and I see maybe her feet sticking out from the couch or her head poking up over the corner of the couch or, something. She takes up 30 seconds to find the most obvious hiding spot. Probably like any kid would do, I would imagine. And so I imagine our attempts to hide from God very much like a child who takes every single second of their allotment to find a hiding spot only to realize that it's been futile. There's nowhere that we can hide that God doesn't see. And so I think the Bible is one big story of hide and seek, of humans hiding and God maybe laughing, maybe sometimes in frustration, maybe crying, saying, I see you. Your clever hiding spots, I see you. So the passage in John chapter 4 today is the longest, I was surprised to hear this, the longest conversation recorded in the Scriptures. The longest. I think that says something. The importance of that, where Jesus is not only just talking to someone for a long time, but it's a Samaritan woman. And in this conversation, in this encounter, so many lines of propriety are crossed. So many cultural and religious boundaries Jesus just obliterates. And it isn't till the very end of John where we realize just, where the disciples, if they would have been there, they would have been like, why are you talking to Jesus? Or Jesus, why are you talking to her? Any proper religious person, proper Jewish person in this case, would have avoided Samaria altogether, would have taken the long route around to go back home, just so you wouldn't have to put yourself in the awkward position of socializing with Samaritan outcasts, let alone a Samaritan woman outcast who just so happened to be an outcast among outcasts. She was the dirtiest of the dirty in this society, in this culture. But God's grace seems scandalous in the face of religious do's and don'ts. That happens all throughout Jesus' ministry, where God's grace through Jesus' interaction with sinners causes the religious ones to say, what are you doing? And to call Jesus a blasphemer for acting in such a way. The religious dualistic mindset that we are plagued with even ourselves, that separates the clean from the unclean, would have Jesus travel that long route back home and avoid this type of encounter with the woman at the well. But John would have us believe in this story that Jesus went to this well on purpose, that this wasn't an accidental visit from Jesus to the woman. Like God seeking Adam and Eve out in the garden, Jesus in this story seeks out the woman who makes her daily trip to this well during the midday time when all of the other women would have been gone. And so the story lets us assume that the only people at this well is Jesus and the Samaritan woman, because this was the woman's safe place. This was probably one of the only times when she didn't have to be in view of other judging eyes. To be at the well at midday when all the other women have gone home was a moment of peace and solitude for the Samaritan woman. Her fellow Samaritans didn't have to be prophets to know that she had had 5 husbands and that she was currently living with a man that she wasn't married to. Word spreads fast in a small town. Word spreads fast in a small community, but even in a small community, even in a small village where everyone knows everyone, no one has walked in this woman's shoes. No one has been in her exact position and knows. And so John doesn't fill in the scandalous details, and so we're just kind of left to assume what the misdeeds were of this woman. But the moment that we begin to assume, you know the old adage about what happens when we assume? You take the word, how assume is spelled, and we make an ASS out of you and me. I'm sure you've heard that before, so that's not a shock to you this morning. Jesus knows all of us intimately, and he always stands with the ones who have been pushed outside of the circle, and he tells those with stones to put your stones away. For if you are one that has not sinned, then go ahead and throw that first stone. And so the Samaritan woman, she comes to draw physical water from this well, which was for her a physical need to quench her physical thirst. But as a Samaritan and as a shamed woman, there is absolutely no relief for her thirsting soul. She may have been able to quench her physical thirst, but for her spiritual thirst, my friends, wrong ethnicity as a Samaritan, wrong gender as a woman, wrong reputation as a woman with 5 husbands and now living with one who wasn't her husband, and wrong geographical location. Because as the Jewish people said, the only and the proper way and the place to worship is here in Jerusalem. All of you Samaritans that are at Mount Gerizim, that is not the proper place to worship. And so this Samaritan woman has been left out from being given access to this spiritual water well. Access has been denied. I like this quote from Nadia Bolz-Weber, the Lutheran pastor. She says, "I think I am not alone. I mean, the wounded parts of me, whether those wounds were inflicted by others or by my own sin, they are what keep me in motion." Remember that first quote from the beginning, if we could bottle up shame, it would be the greatest energy source. She said, our shame keeps us in motion because I have to try and make up for them or try and convince myself and everyone else that they aren't there, or I have to try and get them healed by the love and the attention of other people, even though none of that ever works out. It sure does keep us in motion. You see, my friends, it doesn't matter if the wound was self-inflicted, and it doesn't matter if it was inflicted by others, or maybe some combination of the two. The Samaritan woman had a wound that she needed spiritual water to heal. And it's the same with all of us in this room. It's the same with every person that is alive. We all have a spiritual wound that keeps us in motion. going from one dry well to the other, trying our best to cover things up and to put on a good front, to fortify the walls that we tend to hide behind. This makes me think of the story of the disciples after Jesus had been crucified, and they're kind of in that in-between time, and Jesus had just risen from the dead, and the disciples, they go into this room and they lock the doors. And I can just imagine them kind of doing everything they can to lock these doors out of fear and probably some shame and embarrassment that they weren't the kind of disciples that Jesus would want. And it's in all of this effort to put themselves in this safe room, and Jesus appears in their midst. Jesus doesn't care about our locked doors. That's a lesson that I'm still trying to learn myself. But I think about how these disciples lock themselves in this room, and Jesus appears in their midst, and he speaks peace to them even in their shame, even in their fear. And so here, Jesus meets the Samaritan woman in her hiding place of shame, and he offers her not the physical water, but that spiritual water that had been denied to her over and over again. And so the Samaritan woman responds in the passage, "Give me this water so that I may not thirst." And it's interesting, Jesus doesn't have a bucket of spiritual water to give to her. Jesus begins to address her wound, which in the story, in the text, seems a little harsh. As Jesus says, yeah, you've not only had 5 husbands, but you've got one that you're living with that's not your husband. You know, and you're like, ouch, Jesus, what are you doing? Here's a wounded woman. But in offering this spiritual water, Jesus addresses the wound that she is carrying in her life. Here's another quote from Nadia Bowles-Weber. She says, "You have heard it said that water finds its lowest point." Anyone that has a basement knows this to be true. Water finds its lowest points. She goes on to say, living water finds your lowest points. The living water offered by Jesus Christ finds yours and mine, our lowest points. It flows to our original wound, the thing that we spend so much energy trying to heal through, and all the insufficient ways that we try to heal through relationships and religion, through success, more graduate degrees or more therapy, working out, trying to get your parents to love you. Nadia says that there are a million ways that we try to use substitutes for God and try to make sure that our damage is not seen. My friends, we can be so wrapped up tightly in our shame and so used to hiding that being freed from our shame can be kind of intimidating. To accept and to have faith that we are seen and we are loved just as we are. That is an uncomfortable place to be, because we've been raised in this world that says you can't be loved for who you are. You have to be somebody else. You can't show your wounds and have someone accept you and love you just as you are. Shame has told us that story for so long. But Jesus comes and Jesus unravels that shame for the Samaritan woman and unravels that shame for you and for me. Let me close with this last quote here from a Catholic theologian named James Allison. He describes faith, particularly the faith to believe that Jesus can come in and cover our shame and unravel our shame. That faith is not intellectually ascending to theological propositions. James Allison says that faith is relaxing. Faith is relaxing. Relaxing in the love and the presence of God. In the way that we relax in the presence of someone that we are certain is fond of us. I trust you have a relationship like that in your life. Someone who is fond of you and loves you just as you are. That in their presence and in their company, you can just relax. When we are in the presence of someone that we are certain is fond of us, we are funnier, more spontaneous, we are softer, we are less defended. That's what James Allison says. And so, my friends, as we consider this gospel of a Messiah who comes to us to unravel our shame, let me invite you to do what the Samaritan woman did at the end of the story. Now, the end of the story says that she went off back to her village to tell everyone about this Jesus who knew her and offered her living water. But there's another small detail in there that I just caught this week. That jar, that water jar that she took with her to draw physical water, she left it behind at that well. I wonder if that water jar that probably would have weighed quite a bit full of water, I wonder what we would say in our lives. What is that water jar that we are carrying from place to place? Looking for our fill, that Jesus would say, you can just leave it there. I'll take it from here. Leave your water jar in this place. Drink freely of the grace, the peace, and the love of Jesus, my friends. It's in the name of God, our rock and our Creator. Amen.